Are science and religion compatible? I'm not sure about you, but when I was growing up, and especially in my teen years, I had the impression that you had to choose one or the other. That if you were religious, you probably rejected things like dinosaurs and evolution, or that all true scientists were atheists. And on both accounts, I was wrong. So today I want to talk about why I think there is sometimes this tension between science and religion, what science actually is and is not designed to do, and where I think we all need to be careful in our thinking. First, I think we should acknowledge that science has corrected some mistaken religious beliefs. For example, many ancient Greeks believed that lightning came from the god Zeus, the god of the sky and thunder, whereas today we understand lightning in terms of electrical charges in the atmosphere. And because of examples like this, we can generalize that, religion exists to help explain what science has not yet explained, and that future scientific discoveries will then eventually replace or disprove religious beliefs altogether. Or we might think that modern religions are just newer versions of the same kinds of mistaken religions that we now reject. That's personally what I believed when I was an outspoken atheist myself. But a second reason that science and religion can sometimes be pitted against each other is that Christians can sometimes reject or be slow to adopt scientific ideas that have strong evidence behind them. For a long time, for example, many people, both Christians and non-Christians, believed that the earth was fixed and unmoving because that's what seemed obvious from everyday experience. Then, as evidence for heliocentrism and the Earth's motion grew stronger, some Christians resisted those conclusions because certain biblical passages seem to describe the Earth as fixed in place. Psalm 104, for example, says, "He set the earth on its foundation so that it should never be moved." Instead of reconsidering whether they were interpreting those passages correctly, some people assumed that their interpretation had to be correct and that the science had to be wrong. Now, of course, the evidence is clear that the earth moves, that it's so overwhelming that everyone accepts it. But I'm sure you can think of other modern parallels where people become so attached to a particular interpretation of scripture that they then hesitate to revisit it after new evidence, after strong evidence is discovered. So basically, I do understand why some people see science and religion as conflicting, but I don't think the conflict is necessary when we properly understand the role of a science. So what is science and what can it do? Well, science is a systematic study of the natural world. It helps us study the universe in an organized and repeatable way through observation and measurement and testing and identifying patterns, which in turn help us form conclusions about how things generally work. So if we study water, for example, science can tell us that each water molecule contains 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, or that water is liquid within a certain temperature range, or that under normal atmospheric pressure, water boils at 100 degrees Celsius or freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, or that it expands when it freezes. So science is really good at explaining the how of how the physical world works, but it has its limits too. One of science's limits is that while it is one of the best tools that we have for studying the physical world, it does not give us absolute certainty. We form scientific conclusions based on the available evidence at any given time and on our ability to interpret that evidence. And that means that we have more confidence in some conclusions than others. For example, we have very strong evidence that the Earth orbits the sun, or that germs spread disease, but we have less certainty about things like the nature of dark energy or the long-term effects of certain environmental exposures. And because we follow the evidence and we get new evidence, we sometimes need to revise scientific conclusions when we discover new evidence. For example, many scientists once believed that the universe was eternal, but current evidence strongly suggests that the universe did have a finite beginning. Another limit of science is that it is primarily designed to study things that we can observe, measure, and test, and that means that it struggles to answer questions outside of those boundaries, like questions about meaning or purpose or morality. This includes questions like, why is there something instead of nothing? Or how should we live? Or does God exist? For questions like these, we need to use philosophical reasoning, things like logic or moral reasoning or introspection or human experience. But importantly, philosophical reasoning is not inferior to scientific reasoning. They just are addressing different kinds of questions or different dimensions of the same question. Every once in a while, I hear someone say that only scientifically testable statements, only scientifically testable claims are meaningful or true. And that always makes me smile because that statement itself is not scientific or testable, so it doesn't meet its own standard. Anyhow, just consider the water again, right? Well, we can use science to explain its physical properties and its behavior. We can't use science to tell us why this water is here in the first place. And if I were to tell you that I put the water here for this illustration, me saying that does not compete with a scientific explanation. Those are two different kinds of explanations answering two different kinds of questions. One is explaining how the water behaves, the other is explaining its purpose and intention right now. Both are true at the same time, and knowing both of these angles gives us a fuller understanding of this water. So science helps us understand the physical processes, the physical world, the how. And philosophy helps us think through meaning and purpose and existence, the why. Just because some religious beliefs have turned out to be mistaken, that does not mean that every religious belief is false. After all, some scientific beliefs have also turned out to be mistaken. And so instead of rejecting everything, we should just evaluate every claim on its own merits. And then for the Christian, scientific discoveries also don't need to compete with belief in God. Rather, they can help us better understand how God designed the universe and help us interpret Scripture more faithfully, more accurately. So in the comments, I'm curious, what shaped your view of science and religion growing up? And who are your favorite Christian scientists? And then just for fun, what's a question that you wish we could have absolute certainty about? Of course, if you have other thoughts on this topic or questions about Christianity or apologetics in general, feel free to leave those in the comments too, and I will do my best to respond in a future video. And if you would like to see those future videos, you can click the subscribe button just below this one. And in the meantime, if you want, feel free to check out the other topics on the channel, and I will see you next week.